Happy Place Home Studios.
Welcome to part one of our Happy Place Home Studio series entitled Replacing the Heart of Your Studio. In previous series, particularly our basic recording series, I talked about the upkeep, the care and feeding of your studio and the many, many devices that you may have in your studio. You've got not only your computer, if you're using digital audio, workstation software, but you've got many devices that are themselves pretty much powerful little specialized computers that have to be updated, software revisions and settings and all kinds of things that you need to do to keep them current, take advantage of their features, and keep your studio operating at peak efficiency. So what is the heart of your studio? A lot of people might answer that question very differently. And in an old school studio, when nothing is being run by a computer, it's more likely going to be instrument focused, or your mixer or your PA system or whatever. But in a modern home studio, the heart of the studio is that computer system that runs your whole operation. Now, like me, you may have multiple computers, but you've got that one where your digital audio software is running and it's connected to your audio interfaces and other key interfaces that you might use. You store all of your gigabytes of data, of music tracks and video and whatever else you might be doing on that computer. And if that computer goes out, you've got a problem. So when I say the heart of the studio, that's what I'm talking about in this case. I'm talking about replacing that computer system that runs your entire operation. Now, this is not something that you only do once. If you have had your studio anywhere near as long as I have, which is 25 years now, you may have done it several times. I was counting up, I think I have replaced the central computer at the heart of my studio at least 5 or 6 times at this point. And I'll talk a little bit about that, the generations that I've gone through. It's a scary thing to replace that computer, especially when it's been a while and a lot of technology has changed and interfaces have changed. And it depends on how many things you're doing with that computer. And in my case, I not only record music, but I also do a lot of video work. And have a lot of photographic equipment that's interfaced. So, and of course, I have multiple computers networked together. There's a lot that might need to change, that has changed, and that now you've got to catch up. So why would you do this? Why would you go to the many, many hours of research, work, sweating over the risk to replace the heart of your studio? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Every one of these reasons will touch on you if you're going to actually go through this. So let's just go through some of those reasons. Well, one is performance. Now, I have to admit, I used to buy into Moore's Law back in the day. That was really more CPU based, not overall computer performance, but that the performance of CPUs would double every 18 months. And I think that maybe was true for a while, but it's been a long time since I've seen that kind of performance difference just by replacing a computer every few years. But depending on what you're doing, you can get very significant performance increases, and you may need a performance increase. In my case, my Apple has performed really, really well for a long time. But now that I'm doing 4K videos and higher, it is difficult. The computer I have is having a hard time with 4K. And in fact, this video is not being shot in 4K for that reason. My system is really choking on 4K editing. So performance is certainly one of the reasons. that you may want to upgrade the heart of your studio. Another reason is technology. You want to take advantage of new technology that you can't plug in or that your current computer system won't operate with. Yet another reason is your system is dying. This also applies to me, very much so. My current computer is an Apple iMac 27-inch. I bought it back in 2015. So I've gotten 7 years of fantastic performance out of it, but it is dying in my arms. It is failing to boot sometimes. It is getting flaky, and I'm quite worried that it is going to croak before I can replace it. So I hope that doesn't work. I hope that doesn't happen, I should say. So certainly that's a major consideration if you feel like your system is failing. And of course, many of us that are technophiles, and that kind of goes hand in hand with having a home studio, we like to stay up with the current technology and have something that is current and relevant and new. And again, maybe catching up on generations of technology that we might have skipped over. So if you're going to change your computer, how far are you willing to go? Are you going to change the model, the manufacturer, the operating system? These are things that you have to consider. So just talking about my studio, I'm an Apple guy. I've been an Apple guy for a long, long time, and not just in my studio, but throughout my life. I have many, many Apple devices. My family uses Apple devices, so I've got more than one iPad. I've got my iPhones, network technology. I really am deep with Apple, and I've been doing that for well over 25 years. In terms of the generations of Apple computers that I've used, that's been going back to the 1990s. I started my studio on the original iMac with Mac OS, and I think the last one I remember is Mac OS 8 before making the jump to Mac OS 10. And so I had that original iMac. I went, I think, through a G2, G3, G4 series over several years as they really improved performance with that series of computers. And then I started doing the iMacs, and that culminated in my 27-inch iMac back in 2015. Apple, of course, has gone through technology generations with their CPUs. They started out with, I think, Motorola chips, and they went to Intel. And most recently, they've changed to their own technology, their M1, which has been something that we'll talk about because that's a real major change. And I've had to wait to do this upgrade because of that major change. Over the years, I've been very happy and satisfied with Apple, and I feel really good about the decision that I made to go with Apple when I decided I wanted to go digital in my studio. I think Apple, especially back in the day, always had a big advantage over Microsoft and Microsoft operating systems when it came to digital technology for audio and video. And I think that still exists today, although perhaps the gap is closing. I have used Microsoft computers in my career all my life, and I have a Microsoft laptop, or I should say a Dell laptop running Microsoft Windows 10 in my studio. I use it for several things, including Rocksmith, which I continue to love to this day. But the current controversy surrounding the Windows 11 upgrade is a really good reason that I don't want to change. Apple has done things over the years that made life somewhat difficult to upgrade and stay current. And that includes some operating system upgrades that literally broke the previous generation of some of my key software, including my Motu software. But that has happened rarely, and the software developers have caught up. But I cannot recall a situation where Apple released a version of an operating system that you already had that was not compatible with one of the computers. And now that's what Microsoft is doing with Windows. I can't upgrade my Dell laptop that's only about 4 years old to Windows 11 because it's 4 years old. So I'm not going to take that risk with something as important as the heart of my studio. So not much of a consideration for me to change to Windows. Also, on my Mac computers, I run Windows emulation with Parallels, so I've got the best of both worlds anyway. And I think that the Windows runs better under Parallels than it does without Parallels. So I'm going to stick with Apple in this particular case. You may face some of these same challenges and thinking, gee, I'm tired of this particular problem or dealing with this, and I'm going to switch to the operating system that I am not using. One of my favorite YouTube personalities is Rick Beato. And one of the first videos that I watched on Rick's channel was kind of a beef video about Apple. And I thought to myself, that's me right there. And he literally still has his G2 and his G3 and his G4 and his, everything he's ever had. And I don't quite go that far. That'd be 2 roomfuls of stuff at this point if I was trying to do that. And Rick made some really good points. He was having, a real challenge with his Apple thinking at that time. I don't believe that he's changed from Apple, but I'm not sure. But I would say that I remain happy with Apple, and I'm going to stick with them through this pretty big upgrade, this pretty big change. As far as my computer dying, well, it is a almost 8-year-old computer. And that is one of the longest stretches I've ever stayed with one computer in 25 years. So I think that's tip of the hat to Apple for making such good technology that I could stay with it this long and not get too far behind. And in talking about their new, Apple made a decision to go off the Intel chips and onto their own M1 chip. That really threw up time barriers for me because I could not immediately move to the M1 chip because some of my key software would not work on it. So over the last year, again, those software developers have gotten back up to speed with M1, have done a release or more than one release on the M1 hardware. And so I feel good that my key software from Motu, from Adobe, from Apple are all going to work really, really well from everything that I've heard. And I've also heard from sources that I trust that the Intel emulation that Apple created themselves to have Intel compatibility for M1 users is working really, really well. So I did that research and decided, yep, I'm going to stay with Apple and I want the M1 chip. But then the issue became, but I need a good model. I did not want to go with the PowerBook because I think you can see on the camera, I've got my PowerBook right here, and I love it. But it also cannot handle my 4K video stuff, and that's a very new PowerBook. It's not an M1. But I have a lot of devices that are connected to the heart of my studio. I need really strong USB-C performance, FireWire performance from multiple FireWire multiple controllers inside the computer. And so I did not want to go with the PowerBook. I really need a big screen. And apparently Apple is not going to bring the 27-inch back out for the M1 models. So I've decided to go with a new model of the Mac Studio, and I'm going to walk you through the configuration of that in just a moment here. I had to really bide my time, wait for that model to become available, and ensure that everything I have, or as close to possible, everything I have is going to continue to work with that new computer. So let's take a look at that configuration. Okay, here we are on the Apple site, and I've just simply clicked on Mac up in the menu up here. And you can see that the entire Mac family is represented here, including the new Mac Studio. So I'm going to drill in on the Learn More here. And it's not much to look at. Going to admit they've gone back to, they moved away from the separate server box of the G2, G3, G4 era. Then they moved to the iMac with the integrated, the computer and the screen were one, and now they've separated them out again. And the nice thing, this is obviously a pretty austere but clean design. But then you've also got around the back side of the computer, with our slick little Apple widget here, you've got 4 FireWire connectors, USB connectors, and the horsepower behind them, so that you just have a lot of capability to connect what you need to connect to this box and have everything running at pretty full speed. In looking at this model, especially compared to everything else they had, this is the way that I wanted to go. Now, I was able to use the Mac configurator, of course, to put the configuration together that I wanted. There were not a huge number of options, but within each option there were a lot of selections, for example, with memory and that type of thing. So let's take a look at the configuration that I actually put together. All right, the configuration of the Mac itself is pretty much the top of every option. And I do that these days because it isn't long before, the 256 gigabyte hard drive that you bought back in 2015 is nothing anymore. And the same thing will continue to happen, I'm sure. So the configuration of my Mac includes on the back, they've got the 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports, the 2 USB-A ports, and an HDMI port, which is awesome. And 128 gigs of RAM, 8 terabytes of hard disk storage, which is awesome as well, and definitely going to be needed. I've already got 2 external 9 gigabyte drives, and one of which is half full with the content that I already have, so I definitely need that storage space. The CPU, which is of course all important, is the top of the line M1 CPU. It's the M1 Ultra CPU with 20 cores. Again, went with the highest option that I could select here. And on the front, you've got the 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports. So that's a total of 6 of those ports altogether, which is awesome. And then there's also an SD card reader on the front of the Mac. That is a nice configuration for the Mac itself. The next big ticket item on the order is my Studio display, which is a 5K display that has nanotech glass and pretty impressive stuff. I have stepped into the store to take a look at this, and it is absolutely amazing. So I'm really looking forward to this. It is 27-inch, which is the same as I'm used to, which is great. And as long as I can zoom in, I can see what I need to see, of course. And this display is really, truly top of the line. Now, past that, I just got the usual accessories and a bunch of cables. I hate it when I get a new Mac and I don't have the right adapters, and I'm going to be using a lot of adapters for the many types of cables that I have, because I've got all the way back to USB 2 connectors that I have to plug in, and many types of connectors that I'll have to have adapters for, of course. I got the keyboard that was available. I was a little disappointed that they did not have an option, as you do on the MacBook, to have the BIO identification that you can just put your finger on and it logs you back in, but hopefully there will be an option for that. This is an expensive computer. I won't lie about that. It's a very high-end configuration, and Apple is already high-end in their pricing. I feel it's worth it. I think that the last, my 27-inch here lasting me for 8 years is a real token of value, and so I'm willing to pay the extra to have the best, and I think that's what I'm getting here with this Apple configuration. Now, the one thing that was and is annoying is that it's going to take me more than 2 months to get this computer. I'll be waiting. It's currently mid-April. I'll be waiting until July for the computer to come in. And of course, a lot of that is COVID this and COVID that, but I don't really feel I have much choice, so I went ahead and got it on order. And of course, the first thing they did was ship me all the cables and stuff. Like I'm going to have something to do with those for the next 2 months, 3 months. But I will be looking forward to getting this configuration when it arrives. It's the first time I bought something that I wasn't able to get in the Apple Store and walk out with. I mentioned this is a multi-part series on upgrading the heart of my studio. I don't know how many parts it will be because I don't know exactly what's going to happen or how long it's going to take. I have a feeling this is going to be an adventure. Like any adventure, it will have some great moments. It will probably have some low points. There'll be some unexpected twists and turns as I go through this process. In our next chapter, in our next episode, we're going to talk about not just upgrading the heart, the computer itself, but the ecosystem around the computer, the wires, the cables, the adapters, the extenders. I really want to end up with a much nicer setup and environment than I have right now because like most, when you've had the same thing in place for years, it tends to get a little cluttered, and this is an opportunity for me to unclutter. And past that, we'll just continue to look at the preparation that I make and the notices I get from Apple about when I'm going to get my computer and hopefully it won't be delayed and all those kinds of things. And we'll just bundle those up into a multi-part series over the next few months on getting the heart of my studio upgraded. See you then.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Thank you, Apple Watch.
Apple.com should be able to answer that question.
I agree it should.